Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a very rejuvenated Charles Coulombe.
That's me. Back from my 4-week-long fact-finding trip for your brother and the top staff of this fine establishment.
Yeah, a very intensive Bahamian research project, as one fan has commented on.
Oh yes, extremely intensive. You have no idea the fine business techniques have developed in some of the multinationals down there in the Bahamas. I tell you, it is amazing what they've come up with. For instance, I'll give you an example. Okay. Imagine, if you will, a group of high-powered executives, not unlike the suits on the top several floors, right? And imagine, if you will, them and their wives and or significant others, all on the beach, right? And the band playing Begin the Beguine. And a hosted bar giving out free booze to everybody who came up. Mojitos and daiquiris and zombies and all sorts of things. And imagine a calypso band. I mean, it was amazing. I had no idea how much this improves the efficiency of management. I've learned. You're laughing. Let me tell you something. The techniques that they taught me down there can be adapted here. I'll give you an example. You know, today, of course, being Friday and the Feast of the Sacred Heart, you know that the special, as it is every Friday on fish at the commissariat, is mackerel.
Right.
Okay. Now, why is it mackerel? It's because no one has told the staff of the commissariat that you don't age fish the way you age game.
Ah.
See? Now, if they had the Bahamian way, long about Tuesday or Wednesday, they'd begin sort of cevicheing the fish, you know, so that it would keep better than it does.
Uh-huh.
And by Friday, instead of the kind of smelly and unrecognizable mess they drop on our plates, it would be, you know, zestful.
Zestful?
Zestful.
Great.
Wouldn't you rather have zestful than that brown glop?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Now, that's not all I learned.
Okay.
I learned that rum issued at intervals throughout the day can make for a happy workforce.
Wow. And you know a lot about rum to begin with. You wrote a book on rum.
I sure did, and I well, that's one of the reasons why they were so happy to have me down there. I had to give the keynote address at one of the many banquets. You know, one of the things that was interesting was that this whole trip was very low on seminars, but there were a lot of banquets, there were lunches, there were dinings in, receptions, there was a lot of that. I don't really seem to remember many seminars. I don't remember going to a single seminar. I don't think they had any. But that in itself shows that the Bahamians are pioneering new business techniques that the rest of us would be wise to follow.
Sounds like it.
And so I'm, as you say, completely rejuvenated. I'll tell you what, you know, not the mug itself, which is kind of Christmassy, but the coffee itself. You know, this was the Bahamian coffee I brought home. You bet. It was hard getting it through customs, I'll tell you. But good to the last drop, ladies and gentlemen. Uncle Eric's Bahamian coffee. Good for it ails you. You're staring.
What do you want me to do? I don't know.
Well, anyway.
Okay.
No, that's antisocial. Look, I can't wait to see your brother and share what I've learned with him.
I'm sure he'll be pleased.
It's going to revolutionize. Well, I mean, considering how much money you spent sending me down there, it's yeah. It'll be good for him to know that he's made every penny back on his investment.
Ah, excellent, excellent.
So all I can say, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you're ever invited to a 4-week-long Bahamian business conference, you do it. Ooh.
Anything else going on?
Well, yes, as I say, on a more somber note, although also a jollier note, it is the Feast of the Sacred Heart today. And, you know, the Sacred Heart is something that for a long time, especially after Vatican II, Catholics kind of lost sight of. And that was not a good thing. That was a bad thing. Because the Sacred Heart epitomizes Christ's human love for all of us. It's intimately connected to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, to adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, to the kingship of Christ, and thus the queenship of Mary at all. It's all very important. I deal with this in my Grail book.
I was gonna, yeah.
And of course, the precious blood. And the idea of things like reparative communion, which, on every First Friday, when you go to Mass to fulfill the requirements of the promises of the Sacred Heart to St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, you're supposed to offer your communion in reparation for all the insults and indignities offered the Sacred Heart.
Interesting.
And for the coldness with which we human beings return our Lord's love. So that's important. Also, Sunday this year is June 10th.
Uh-huh.
Now, it's Emancipation Day, of course. Actually, that's not true. That's later in the week. But it is June 10th, which is White Rose Day.
That pin.
That pin, the white rose, which was the symbol not just of the House of York, but of the House of Stuart. And the Stuarts, as you recall, were the primarily Catholic family who ruled the three kingdoms, England, Scotland, and the free abortion state of Ireland.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I say that? Not that we're miffed. Even in the depths of the Bahamas, I followed the abortion thing. You know, let me just say this about that. I have a lot of Irish blood. I grew up singing Irish songs. I have a lot of friends over there. I love the country. I love St. Patrick. I love St. Patrick's Day. I love corned beef and cabbage, which is more Jewish than Irish, but that's a whole other story. But I can think of few things in my life that have disgusted me as much as the Irish referendum. And you could say, well, the English brought in abortion in 1967 and the Americans in 72. Yeah, it's true they did, but you know what? If you had tried to have a referendum on abortion in Britain in 1967, it would have been defeated easily, and the same in the America of 1972. Obviously, the populations of both countries have been carefully massaged and worked and dealt with by their masters and owners. And so today, I have no doubt that such a referendum in both countries would pass easily. But to have this happen as an expression of the popular will in Ireland, what do you say to that? The same with the thing on gay marriage. I understand that this is a way of cocking a snook at the church. I get it. But please don't talk about the people of the men of 1916, because this isn't what they died for. And don't attack the British Crown if you're Irish, because you've got nothing to say. The moral superiority that the Irish have always enjoyed assuming because of their years of abuse at the hands of the English, they've just abdicated. They've given up. You no longer have that now. What was the heart and soul of resistance to abortion in Ireland? Was it the Catholic Church? No. It was the Orange Order, who are the same people who are responsible for keeping abortion out of Northern Ireland. This is insane. A friend of mine, an Irish friend of mine, who oddly enough lives there, he said, well, if the 33% of the Irish who voted against abortion moved to Northern Ireland, you'd at once make it Catholic and ensure that it stayed pro-life. But this is a miserable thing. And yet, you can trace it in a sense historically all the way back to the terrible overthrow of the House of Stuart in 1688, as with so many other evils. So when June 10th comes around on Sunday, or on Monday, if you want to have masses said for the repose of the souls of the Stuart kings. Prayed for the English, the Irish, the Scots and the Welsh, and for the Americans and all the other English speakers, that someday, somehow, we would gain the faith that was taken from us so long ago, and that the recent apostasy of Ireland come to an early end, that the Irish pull their derrieres out of their heads and become Catholic again. Anyway.
Is that St. Patrick prophecy on its way? Was it a prophecy or a wish?
What, that they get their heads in their derrieres?
No, they'll sink into the ocean.
Oh, no, that was his prayer. That was his hope.
Oh, that was his hope.
That they would sink into the ocean 5 years before the Antichrist would come.
Ah.
He said, my poor Irish, they will never be able to resist his blandishments. And, of course, what they've shown is that, no, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And again, you look at our Irish Americans, like the man who brought in gay marriage here, Mr. Justice Anthony Kennedy, or what's to be said, ladies and gentlemen? It's not that there aren't wonderful exceptions to the rule, but sadly, in our time, the Irish have, the corruption of the best is the worst. And when the Irish were great, they were really great. And now that they're not just moderately scummy, they're horrible.
That's sad.
Same with the French Canadians. I actually think I'm being unpleasant.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
well, of course, because, after what you said, the best is the worst, so...
Well, the Quiet Revolution reduced the French Canadians from being the greatest people in North America to being a nation of scumbags. I'm not afraid to say it. Why should I be?
Yeah.
I think part of the big problem we have in life as Catholics is the inability to be honest and to tell the truth. You've got bishops who are afraid to annoy the media. What the hell is... What do you think you're going to get out of the media anyway? But we've become so conditioned to being stupid and little and moronic that we're stupid and little and moronic. Look at the bishops in Ireland with the whole abortion thing. And a few priests raised their mouths to say, if you voted for abortion, don't be coming for communion. And the result is, oh, it's awful, how can they say that, how can they say that? Well, they can say it because it's true. And if anybody should be listening to this and lives in Ireland and voted for abortion and has the temerity to go to communion without going to confession and confessing their sin of murder, just God will get you in ways you can't begin to imagine. Or, no. God will allow you to get yourself in ways you cannot begin to imagine. See, that's the funny thing, ladies and gentlemen. God really doesn't send us to hell. We take ourselves there because we want to go there, following our own will rather than His. And that is what Ireland has done as a nation this past month.
Yeah. Well, I'm tempted to almost go on a tangent, what that makes me think of, because I think in terms of metaphor. And believe it or not, that makes me think of, this will sound unbelievable, but it makes me think of the movie The Dark Knight, the second Batman movie.
Oh,
have you watched this movie?
I have, when it came out.
At the very end, the Joker's doing one of his Joker things, and there are two boats, and they're getting off the island, and those boats are both wired with bombs.
Right.
And his game is, each one has the detonator to the other, and so if you blow the other boat up, you get to live. And one is filled with the criminals, and the other's filled with the civilians, the good civilians. And the civilians took a vote, and they voted to blow up the prisoner's ship. But you know what? No one wanted to pull the trigger. So I thought that was so deep on the nature of democracy and what you say, which is we tend to vote our uglier side. We can vote for killing, but to actually kill itself, that's
we're too good.
See?
We're too nice.
And so I thought, I don't know. I just that's how my brain works. It makes these connections, and I thought that was a very profound thing of democracy in Batman 2, which was just illustrated on the Ireland thing. Yeah, we'll vote for it to kill people. We just don't want to do it ourselves.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. So let's take it a step further. If you vote that way, you did it. These hands with which I voted, there's blood, like Lady Macbeth.
Like to me, I feel like the way to stamp out abortion is to make people more involved in the actual process.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, here, yeah, this is fine. This is your body, right? Yeah, so go ahead and watch it. It's going to be fine, right? It's not going to be a big deal.
And mutatis mutandis, at the furthest remove, I pay for abortion with my taxes.
Right.
I need to remind myself of that. And I do every time I send off the check. I'm paying to kill infants. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, in infanticidal, murderous societies such as ours, we make ourselves happy by forgetting reality. We mustn't do that. Always bear in mind when you do, and mind you, I'm not saying don't pay your taxes. That would lead to other evils that are perhaps worse. But it's important in order to destroy the sense of smugness, which, if nothing else, that'll get you to hell, being smug. A good way to do it is to always remember, meditate on what you're paying for when you pay your tax. You are participating in the murder of this society. I am participating in the murder that this society performs. Now, mind you, we're the inheritors of it. It's not like we're like the Irish who brought it on ourselves, and celebrating it, like bloody Liam Neeson. I never want to hear anybody say anything against Oliver Cromwell murdering the tons of Irish, which he did. Liam Neeson, he's your Cromwell for today. Again, let's get real, ladies and gentlemen. The blood is on all our hands. Never forget that. Never allow yourself the luxury of being smart. Well, I'm not involved. Oh, yes, you are. Yes, I am. You didn't think about it all the time because you'd go a little cray-cray and do strange things if you did. But it's important, whenever you feel like getting on your high horse, just remember what's on that high horse with you. Responsibility. But,
okay.
That feels, boy, that has really harshed my mellow.
The Irish referendum?
The whole thing. I mean, gosh, all of a sudden I wish I was taking a management course back in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, all right, well, let's go on.
Okay, on to happier things, like a new book from Tumblr House, Under the Watchful Sky.
Wow.
This is from the same author who wrote From Afar that we published last December. This is going to be turned into a trilogy. This is book 1 of the Watchful Sky series.
Huh.
So this is... I finished this book in 3 days. It's a really quick page turner. It's very good. We have the first chapter PDF on our website on the book page. If you guys have been itching for a new story, new novel to get into, read that. And I guarantee you will be hooked. But if you have a lot of essential life activities that you need to do, don't go to that. Whatever you do, don't go to that page, okay? Because I don't want to create problems for you because, I don't want to take away from those essential life activities because you're going to be tempted after reading this. It's a very good first chapter. My mom just read it and she's hooked. I mean, she's like, wow. So, a little inspection there. Yeah, dystopian novel. We got a blurb back there from Sarah Reinhard. Calling it engaging, exciting, dystopian done right. And I couldn't agree more.
Wow.
For $15 on the Tumblr House website.
That's kind of an interesting contradiction, dystopia done right.
Yeah,
So the whole point of dystopia is that it's no fun. Wow, this dystopia, gosh, I love it. But no, it's absolutely. Buy it, ladies and gentlemen. Read it.
There we go. Okay, let's get started.
Oh boy.
First question is from Dustin Dufault.
Hello, Dustin Dufault.
Dufault. Charles, I just began watching Versailles, a dramatized series on the early reign of King Louis XIV. In the first episode, there are several scenes depicting the scandalous lifestyle of the young king and his inner court, including his brother, Monsieur Philippe. This includes multiple adulterous affairs of the king, as well as acts of sodomy committed by Philippe. Brief research revealed that there is factual bases for these depictions. Presuming them to be true, how does one reconcile these acts, which emanated from what is considered one of the greatest Catholic monarchies, from the teachings of the Church, which squarely put such acts as being inimical thereto?
Well, a couple of things you have to bear in mind. Even in the most Catholic times, people are given to the same sorts of sins they're given to. How could such things emanate from a Catholic monarchy? Well, the way they emanated from the papacy for a good 100 years during the era of the pornocracy, where you have the same sorts of adulterous and sodomitical goings on. Or today's Rome, for that matter, and various times in between. You know, here's the thing you got to understand. At all times and in all places, men are sinful. And the number of sins they commit, by and large, are pretty much the same sins over and over and over. What makes one period different from another is society's reaction to those sins. And that society is usually religiously based. Now, in the case of France, you got to remember a couple of things. One is that Louis XIV's father died pretty early on in his life. Louis XIII. His mother was a very pious lady, Anne of Austria, and she enforced, as you might say, her piety on her son. And sure enough, for a huge part of his life, both he and his brother led very scandalous lives, although, to be brutally frank, in very different ways. What you're not getting there, however, is that both of them later regretted it tremendously. With Louis XIV, it came when his queen had died. When he realized that when Marie Therese died, it came down on him like a ton of bricks what he had put her through. A woman who had literally lived and died for him and loved him more than life itself. The last woman that he was interested in refused to become his mistress, and so he married her morganatically. And from that time on was far more pious than he had been before. Philippe, he had a lot of problems, did Philippe. That's the sodomitical brother. But he too, you know, when he got older, he realized he'd bred a lot of problems for himself. But what's interesting is that we live in a society that looks at that, and while it says, oh, look at those terrible kings, look at how they behaved. Yeah, well, those kings were behaving in ways that their society in their times disapproved of. The people who make such films are hypocritical in the sense that our society praises them. What was wrong with Philippe or Louis XIV behaving in that fashion, according to the modern way of life? And yet they present them as though they were scandals. Think about that. Our modern television expects more out of Catholic kings than it does out of anyone else.
Well, they're hypocrites. That's the greatest sin. It's worse to try and come short than to never try at all, to just be a nihilist.
Oh, I see. Well, that makes sense. I see. It's better to have no standards at all than to have standards and fail.
That's right, because then you're being honest and truthful, and you're not being holier than thou when you're failing. Except
even putting it that way makes you holier than thou. So there's no escape. No, it's the other thing too is that the enormity and the amount is I suspect somewhat inflated for drama's sake. Remember, if you get your history from television and movies, bear in mind that unlike books, which are trying to sell a set of ideas, the movies, etc., are just trying to sell. And nothing sells like sleaze. Look at Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Which is a pity because it's horribly well written and doesn't need all of the egregious acres of flesh. But, that's okay.
I haven't actually read it. Have you read the books?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
But they're pretty egregious too.
Oh, okay.
But I'm saying the basic plot lines and storylines and characterizations are actually quite good. You don't need all this stuff.
Yeah, I thought you were watching on some channel and all those scenes are skipped and nothing was lost.
Well, it's not they don't skip them. What they do is they've got these black boxes.
Oh, okay.
That you can't see anything that's going on behind the box. But nothing is lost. Not at all.
What channel was that?
Oh, it wasn't a channel. It was a private person putting this stuff out.
Oh, cool.
No,
Okay.
I'm afraid that it may have been gotten to.
Oh, I see.
Because I haven't been able to see the more recent ones as a result.
I see.
But the other thing that comes to mind, I may have told this story before, but it's worth remembering. I had a friend called James Bella who was a writer of thrillers, international intrigue and espionage things, and he regaled us with the time that in the late '60s, when it was decided these thrillers had to have X amount of sex in them. All right, so he got this call from his editor that he needed to put X amount of sex in it, just as he'd reached a point in his book where he said the doorknob was turning. Now, what he'd intended was that the door would open and in would come an enemy spy, and they'd have kind of a shootout or a fight or something. Well, instead, the door opens and in comes this gorgeous blonde who has no relation to anything in the story, no connection to anything. Then follows, as he puts it, a sequence of the most improbable lovemaking this side of Mars, just totally out of whack and unbelievable. And then she leaves and never shows up again. But he says you can tell when that happened if you read that particular novel. And now it's become just the general thing in thrillers.
You told me a term for this. The term? Isn't it? Or maybe it was a different type of. No, I thought you used the word bodice rippers.
Oh, those are for historical romances.
Oh, okay.
Those are called bodice rippers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've always said if I ever wrote a romance novel myself, I would call it Love's Ripped Bodice.
Okay.
That would make it real plain for anyone who wasn't quite with it. All right, what else we got?
Okay, next two questions are from Patrick McCarty. First question, what's your opinion of the John Birch Society? Would you consider it a quasi-Catholic conservative organization? And what is your opinion of such notable Catholic Birchers as Dean Mannion, California Congressman in 1972, American Independent Party nominee for President John G. Schmitz, Jack McManus, and founder and Catholic convert Robert Welch? Thanks and keep up the good work.
Well, firstly, you made me feel very nostalgic bringing up those names. Jack is still with us, thankfully. The others, I think, have all gone on to their respective rewards. Dean Mannion, who was the dean of the law school at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate a lot of what the John Birch Society wrote and did and so on, but it always seemed to me that it was oversimplified, a lot of it. On the one hand. On the other hand, it also seemed to me that they were unwilling to examine the American inheritance in the same way they looked at other things.
Well, that's true for most Americans.
Well, it is, and I don't hate their guts for it, but
yeah.
I mean, he's asking about the JBS.
Yeah.
If you asked me about some other group that said the same thing, I'd say, well, they do this. Well, okay.
Okay.
No, we Americans do not like looking at what we take for granted, because if we did, it would be uncomfortable. But, there were a lot of very well-intentioned people in the JBS. They used to have their American opinion bookstores all over the place. Back when communism was a bigger threat than it is now that we simply absorb it without thinking about it. No, I mean, let's say they certainly had a good chunk of the problem in their heads, if not all of it.
So you mentioned they oversimplify, like
Yeah,
like how, like what
well, I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, you look at things like the Bilderbergers and the CFR and all these guys. They're not as unilateral and as monolithic as you would think from a cursory reading of JBS material. I mean, there are all sorts of, how do I put it, degrees within them. And also, you got to bear in mind, too, that a lot of what they saw as conspiracy is true. It's part of a conspiracy in a sense. But I mean, look at Americans, okay, as a group. Now, as we know, the John Birch Society, not being a Catholic organization per se, was always for religious liberty, but it certainly was not for Catholicism as the religion of the country. Although I'm glad Robert Welch not a Catholic. But it certainly did not see that the country's basic problem was its lack of Catholicism. It didn't see that.
What did they say was our biggest problem?
That we were being subverted by a bunch of evil, well-to-do people, which was not untrue.
I see. So it just didn't get to the heart of the matter, really.
No, because said people, I mean, look, rich people like poor people operate in accordance with whatever it is in their little pointed heads. Now, the sad truth of the matter is that what they saw as Illuminati and Masonic influence was simply what being an American is for most Americans. I mean, again, what is the basic creed of Freemasonry? It's conduct over creed. It doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're a nice person. Now that view is as much a part of who we are as Americans as Catholicism is about being Italian. And I mean, even Italians who are communists or whatever, culturally, they're more Catholic than Catholics in Wheeling, West Virginia.
Right.
Whereas we Americans are Freemasons culturally.
Thank you for giving a shout out to the Italian things. It's always the French Canadians and the French who are doing good things. I'm glad Italians can do some things good now and then.
They do a lot of good things.
Yeah, spaghetti and pizza. I know.
Dago red wine. You know, in the straw thing wrapped around the bottom. You never seen that?
Yeah, it's great.
And with a candle on top of it,
yes,
too, you know?
It's great.
I mean, how many college apartments in this nation of ours had as their romantic illumination an empty bottle of Dago Red with a candle stuck in it? And generation after generation of college kids have thought that was really cool.
It is cool.
See? And you say I don't praise the Italians. There's a lot to praise about the Italians.
Okay, well let's finish our praise.
No, it's high culture.
Yeah, high culture. Yeah,
Tony
sure.
Danza.
Okay. Let's. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I even brought that up.
Well,
I'm sorry I even brought that up.
You see, I'm praising Italian culture, and what do I get?
You're very vexing right now, Charles.
What? Al Capone.
Oh, okay. There we go. Al Capone.
Al Capone.
You don't like the way he ran Chicago?
They ran it better than Daley Jr. does, or Rahm Emanuel.
Well, that's true.
See, there was a much what's the word I want? Smaller death rate under Al Capone than there is today.
You know, that's what I hear. The strange things I hear about those crime lords, like when they're in control, there's such a low crime rate. Because it's not allowed. They don't allow it.
No, they don't allow no competition.
The same thing happened with Pablo Escobar, I heard. Like, he ruled with an iron fist, and then when he died, like, all hell broke loose.
Everything was too, because they don't allow independent operators. So you better be nice. Or, I mean, we had I don't want to be specific, but it was a restaurant here in L.A. called, oh gosh, you know, it's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was an Italian restaurant. With it was on Vermont, south of Las Vegas, Sarno's.
Okay.
And they had singing waiters and all that. It was a great place. And Mr. Sarno was connected. I don't know that he was a made man, but he was certainly connected. And one night, a couple of robbers came to Mr. Sarno's home of a non-white persuasion, and they broke in and they killed Mr. Sarno and stole stuff.
Oh no.
Well,
okay.
This was not well regarded in certain other areas of the criminal community, certain, shall we say, better organized areas. And would you believe that the people that killed poor Mr. Sarno turned themselves in for their own safety's sake?
Really?
Yeah. The price was put on their little stupid heads. And the Maroons, now mind you, I don't know if, because they've got people on the inside.
Did they confess to murder?
Oh yeah.
Wow, they rather spend jail time. Wow.
Well, they felt they'd be safer on the inside. But I don't know what became of them. But I pay even money. I bet even money that they didn't last long on the inside.
Wow.
Because you don't screw with people when they're protected. Well, you can. You can do whatever you like. It's a free country. If you don't mind dying, sure.
Wow.
But don't let anyone think that this was intended as an insult on Italian Americans. It's not.
I'm not insulted.
Good. I love the Italians. Not just the food. Not just the music. Not just the artwork. The Pope's Italian, usually. Except when he isn't.
Yeah.
And where's the headquarters of my religion?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there.
That's right.
You can see how well run it is. Slow burn on that one. Oh, like the French Canadians would do a better job.
Wow.
Yeah. No. I mean, let's face it. There isn't a Catholic nation on the face of the world today that doesn't deserve to get kicked this way this Sunday. Not the Italians, the Irish, the French Canadians, and none of us. We've all pretty much lived down to the worst.
Yep.
So, anyway, as we used to say in the Civil Rights era, there's the hard rains that are going to fall.
Did you use first person plural on that? Were you part of the Civil Rights movement?
No, not personally.
Oh, okay.
My parents were into that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
I was too young. All I could do was hand out pamphlets on Hollywood Boulevard, calling for freedom for our brothers, solidarity and all that.
Is that what you did? Wow. Okay. Okay.
For the Black Panthers.
For the Black Panthers?
Yeah, it's true.
Wow. Okay, Patrick McCarty's second question. What's your opinion of paleoconservatism? Do you believe it to be a noble, respectable, and useful political ideology? And what do you think of many of its traditional Catholic adherents, such as Pat Buchanan, Joe Sobran, Chronicles Magazine's Thomas Fleming, Russell Kirk, and the like?
Well, paleoconservatism was a mixed bag. And by that I don't mean mixed bag in terms of good and evil. I mean a mixed bag in terms of stuff. Because you had some paleocons who were Burkeans, like Russell Kirk. In other words, followers of Edmund Burke. You had others, like Fritz Williamson or the entire Triumph crowd, who were followers of various European Catholic people, Carlists or whatever, Chamorros. You had Southern agrarian types. It was a mixed bag. But by and large, they were the closest thing we had in my time to authentic conservatism, and whatever that means. Here we have to be a little specific. You see, ladies and gentlemen, in Europe and Latin America, what they call socialist, we call liberal. What they call liberal, we call conservative. What they call conservative, except for the paleocons, we didn't really have.
Interesting, okay.
And so what's a liberal by that standpoint? Well, a liberal is someone who's for, free trade is the first and all and be all. Who's for complete freedom of speech, freedom of this and that. That was classical liberalism. A free church and a free state. The opponents of that were, in this country were always very small, certainly after the Revolution.
Uh-huh.
And they have rarely been what you would call an organized body. And if they have been, they've been very divided among themselves. So, like, for instance, a man like Russell Kirk, for most of his life, would look at the Glorious Revolution and at the American Revolution and see these as basically conservative things.
Okay, that's...
Well, I mean, there's a whole set of reasons and explanations as to why they.
It's almost oxymoronic to call a revolution a conservative movement.
Well, it is, and so they would make exceptions and explain why it wasn't really a revolution, and so on, so on, so on.
Okay.
And mind you, you know, when you consider how much good in general people like Russell Kirk did, I'm certainly not disposed to throw out the baby with the bathwater in that regard. Because, I mean, Kirk was a brilliant thinker, but he was committed to something that he had to somehow defend. And a lot of people are. I mean, you know, if I were to come up to you and say, you know, most of your ancestors up until about 200 years ago were pretty stupid, who's going to like that? You know?
Yeah.
The only thing worse would be for me to come up to you and say, you know, your whole life's work has been just a total waste, which is how the older clergy feel when the younger priests say the Tridentine Mass. But anyway, moving right along, anyway, but, you know, by and large, a lot of the abstract arguments they made about different things were quite true. And certainly they were far better than anything else on the menu.
Okay. What are some of the defining characteristics that make a person a paleoconservative?
Well, firstly, a paleoconservative is suspicious of the whole idea of human progress and human evolution.
Mm.
And I'm not necessarily talking about biological evolution, but about the idea that of our own abilities we can improve ourselves. And that we can somehow our insights of the moment are superior to the traditions that have been handed down to us.
Ah.
Our ancestors were equally as fallen as we are. The difference is they admitted it, and they had a ton of experience. Whereas we pretend we're perfect, and even though the evidence of what we do doesn't bear that out. Ask the Irish after the referendum if you don't believe me. So that's, I mean, the place of religion and tradition in governing human behavior is very big with them. The submission of economic issues to ethical ones.
Oh.
That's another big one. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be for or against this or that kind of government regulation over the economy. What they will say, though, is that morality is more important than money. And that just because you might make more money this way doesn't mean that's the way to go.
Okay.
Also, the paleocons will, they believe in the value of honoring our ancestors, whoever they may have been, in their own right. They have a tremendous suspicion of progress and the new. That doesn't mean they don't accept it.
Yeah.
It means let's see if it works first before embracing it.
Right.
So in that sense, they're very pragmatic as regards progress. They tend not to believe in the idea that you know, that we all do, of this inevitabilism that new is better. Maybe new isn't better. Maybe new stinks. Maybe new's a crock. Maybe new is really old, repackaged, and made to look new, when really it's the same old stinking garbage. So.
Yeah. Okay, next question is from Joseph Handy. Howdy from Texas A&M University.
Howdy, Aggies. Especially you cadets. You know who you are.
Here in Aggieland, there's a healthy and growing community of trads, many of whom are fans of the show.
God bless you, even though I went to Animal Mine.
My question regards the four creeds that you often bring up. To wit, if you accept all the dogmatic definitions, indulgences and the Trinity and so on, but also believe in abortion and communism or other such problematic things not mentioned in the four creeds, are you still a solid Catholic as far as they are concerned?
No. You got to bear in mind that anyone who would believe everything is in the four creeds is hardly likely to be communists or abortionists. I mean, not least because of the role the church has given in determining morality in the creeds. So no, I mean that's very amusing, but no, it wouldn't happen. I mean, the communists would be knocked out by I believe in God, which is a good communist is not supposed to. As for the abortionist, I think not.
Okay, so he mentioned communists. What about fascists?
Oh, that's a different story.
No,
No,
I was trying to get at you.
It is, because fascists do not have to not believe in God. Nazis may be another question.
Yeah.
They're not particularly pro-Christian.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, quite the opposite. But fascists, meh.
Meh. Okay.
Meh.
Okay, next question is from Anthony. Does the sacrament of anointing of the sick wipe away mortal sin? When my father was dying, I took him up to a priest to be anointed. At this point, my father was not mentally able to confess his sins, so my hope is that he was forgiven. Your thoughts?
Well, yes, it does absolve you of mortal sin, it absolves you of everything, which is why it's so important to get it to people. And you don't have to be apparently conscious to receive it. You know, the very fact that you wanted to and were in a position to get your father there probably would reveal something about the disposition he was in. Now, I know that sounds odd, but God made the sacrament available to him through you. If it wouldn't have done him any good, I doubt highly that would have happened. But it's at least talked about sacrament, and that's a pity because it's an amazing one. The reason why we pray to Our Lady now and at the hour of our death is in hopes that when we come to die, we'll have had it, you know, just beforehand. That's where they talk about an unprovided death, is a death where you don't have the last rites. And there are a lot of prayers against that, because it's such a wonderful thing to have. It basically cuts you off from this sinful world and prepares you for heaven. It also sometimes heals the sick. And here's the funny thing about that. I got this from Dom Granger, and it's quite wonderful. The healing of the sick is considered to be so much a part of the ordinary fruits of the sacrament that if you completely recover from, say, cancer, you're riddled with cancer, you're given the last rites, and you recover, that is not considered a miracle.
Why?
Because the healing of the sick is considered one of the ordinary graces given by the sacrament. So if you're healed by it in body, it's not registered as a miracle. It's just shrugged and accepted.
Isn't that almost like redefining a miracle then? I mean, that's not natural means. I mean, that's...
No, but it's a supernatural thing. But as I say, it's considered so much a part of the sacrament that it's just not considered a miracle. Anymore, let's put it this way, and again, I hate to get all gospel-like on you. What's the greater miracle? To have all of your sins, including your mortal sins, lifted from you, or to be cured of cancer?
Well, okay, I see what you're saying. The former.
Right. The former is the greater miracle, but it's not a miracle in the sense that it's part of the ordinary results of the sacrament.
Ah.
And that's why it's not considered to be a miracle. I mean, if it comes to the intercession of a saint, it's a miracle. If it comes because you went to Lourdes, you got some water on you, it's a miracle. If you recover completely as a result of the last rites, the sacrament of the sick, extreme unction, whatever you want to call it, it's not considered a miracle at all.
Yeah.
Although it certainly appears as one, doesn't it?
Yeah. You know, you said it's our least popular sacrament to talk about, or in terms of popularity. I know why. It's because we don't ever think we're going to get sick and die. It's just not an unpleasant thing. So we don't like to think that about anointing of the sick and being in that position.
The only time you like to think about it is when, as with our friend, you're in the position of seeing that a friend of yours gets it.
That's really nice, though. I mean, it's really comforting, when a person isn't able to do a confession for various reasons, dementia or whatever, that you still have a very, very powerful sacrament there.
You have a powerful sacrament. You can say, well, gee, how do you know they're going along with it? Well, the very fact that you're in a position to get it for them would imply, God being all-knowing, would imply that it's going to do them some good.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me when my mother was dying. She had the last rites 3 times, twice in the traditional manner, once in the Novus Ordo. The first 2 times she was unconscious. The last time was the day before she died, or the day before she died. And she was conscious, and she mouthed the Latin responses. She made all the in the right spots, and she made all the responses, and I looked and I realized that she knew she was on her way out, and that she was reconciled to it, because she said them without any hesitation, without anything. Of course, she'd been sick for 8 months, so I think she'd probably gotten used to the notion she was on her way out.
Yeah.
But that really has stuck with me. The fact that she mouthed the responses.
Because that's not a requirement.
No, not at all. Not in the slightest. But it was nice to know that she was aware the last time she got it. And then she died a couple of days later. So, anyway, what else we got?
Yeah. Okay, next question is from Dylan Bruner. What does Charles have to say about the philosophy and life of Freidrich Neitzsche?
Really? God is dead, Nietzsche. Nietzsche is dead, God. Which of these 2 propositions is easier to prove? No, I mean, frankly, I'm not impressed. He died in a madhouse because he went crazy because of his ideas, the whole Übermensch thing. Man trying to be God is insanity. I feel about Nietzsche in the way I feel about Ayn Rand, which is not much.
Ayn Rand?
Yeah.
Wow, I don't know much about Ayn Rand, but a lot of people really hype that. Is it, I don't even know if it's a he or she.
She.
That's how. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
she.
so you're really cued in.
Yeah.
It's a she.
It's a she. Wow.
A Russian she.
Don't conservatives espouse Ayn Rand a lot?
Some do, but she was very much, at the very least, a agnostic. She was against what she called altruism.
Okay.
We should all be out for number one, etc. And so a lot of libertarians look to her for guidance and so forth.
But you're not impressed?
Not in the slightest.
Okay. Why do you think Ayn Rand and Nietzsche are so popular then?
Well, because they appeal to our egos. What do you think? You can always sell human beings on anything that appeals to our ego. That's how Satan got us in the beginning. And he keeps doing it. He's got a whole trailer full of shoddy goods to sell us, and we buy. Here, have some steamed crab. Oh, really? Okay. If you do it, you'll be the smartest guy around. Oh, okay. Are you sure this will make me smart? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next question is from Jacob Barrett.
Okay, Jacob.
Hello, Mr. Coulombe.
Hello.
If you could pick any time and place to live in history, which would you choose and why?
I would say the United States in the late 21st, or the early 21st century. Say about 2018 or so.
That's now.
Wow, you are on top of things.
How could you say that?
It's the only time I know.
You know 1920s,
No. I know what I've read about them. I know what I've been told about them by people who lived them. But I don't know them. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the first time I had a migraine headache, I'd want to come running back to 2018 immediately to get my Tylenol for migraines.
Oh, so that's you. You're all about the comforts. You're not about the higher spiritual realities.
Well, as I mentioned to Dustin Defoe before, on this broadcast, every age has the same stupid sins. And I might have been terribly shocked being approached by Monsieur Philippe, Louis XIV's brother, as much by his lack of taste as by his bizarre interests.
So you want to live in the age of abortion?
I don't want to, but it's the only one I know. I mean, look, when I want to go, let's put aside historical periods, which arguably, I don't really know what it was like to live in the Middle Ages, or in the colonial era, the 18th century, which is a period I'm fascinated about. And I have to admit, I'd love to go back in time and explore them. Absolutely. But in terms of living them, I was placed here. This is what I know. Would I go back to, say, the late 60s, which I remember fairly well, or the mid-60s? Yeah, my mom and dad were alive, would take care of me.
Wow.
I mean, honestly, I think we tend to fool ourselves in that we develop a nostalgia for times and places we haven't been. And there is a utility to that. There is. There's utility to it because the here and the now is full of itself. I don't care where that here and now is. The here and now is always full of itself, always thinks it's the best thing that ever existed. It's just so wonderful, Mankind has never been so tremendous as it is now, and no place on earth can be as wonderful as here is, which is all garbage, absolutely. And so I certainly understand and support that kind of nostalgia for elsewhere and elsewhere. Absolutely. But when push comes to shove, I'm here and now.
It's very, that's the moral of the movie Midnight in Paris.
Yeah.
Have you seen that movie?
I have.
You like that movie?
I do.
Yeah, so I thought that was a good movie. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and it's a clean one.
Which is rare, yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's why I can actually recommend it.
It's a clean film, and yeah, it does, as you say, it does have that point. Would I have loved to have seen Paris in the 20s? Sure. Would I have loved to have seen Paris in the 1890s, the Belle Epoque?
Yeah.
Paris of the pre-revolution? You bet.
Yeah. Paris
of the Middle Ages? Uh-huh. I'd love to see all of them. Would I want to live there? God put me here. He had the ability to put me in any of those times and places. From all eternity, God could have had me born any place on earth at any time on earth. But for reasons known only to himself, he decided that I would be born on the island of Manhattan the day John F. Kennedy was elected. That's what happened. And since I presume he knew what he was doing, he did it for a purpose. And the rest of my life has to be trying to find out what that purpose is and attempting to accomplish it. But, having said that, I'd be lying if I told you that there wasn't an awful lot of stuff from other times and other places that I don't prefer. Of course I do. I mean, I much prefer the way men dressed until my early teenage years, the way women dressed until I was little. When men wore hats and women wore slips. Absolutely. When you'd go into theaters and everyone was lit up and you'd watch the cigarettes,
Oh
And you
yeah.
watch the film playing on the cigarette smoke.
Oh.
That was great. The diesel smell of the streets of New York. Oh, golly. There's a lot of that time. The 18th century. Gosh, the women with their hoop skirts and high hair, the men with their 3/4 hats and breeches. Oh, you bet. The Middle Ages. Golly, I could do without some of the fashions of the Middle Ages, but by and large, yeah, you bet. The foods. There's all sorts of stuff from days gone by that I'm in favor of. The waltz. Gosh, imagine a Viennese waltz in a Viennese ballroom in 1898. The uniforms, the glittering dresses, the orchestra playing, the sheer elegance, the champagne everywhere. Absolutely. Oh, the 20s. Gosh, don't get me started on a speakeasy. With, everybody doing the Charleston and as they used to say, colder gin and hotter jazz. Absolutely. You bet. And in a sense, it's all mine anyway. It's all part of my inheritance.
That's true.
And, and mind you, I'm all for people recreating those things. I'm all for the Renaissance Fair. I'm all for the Cicada Club. Absolutely. But if you ask me where and when I want to live, here and now.
Okay, so we're going to do a new feature from now on for all our shows on Off the Menu. The last part of the episode will be a discussion or question on a book that we carry in the Tumblr House bookstore.
Wow.
So,
what about the banned ones?
The bad ones?
Banned.
The banned
The ones that have been banned by civil authority.
Oh.
We're not going to discuss those, are we?
We don't sell banned books in our store.
Oh.
Yeah. Gosh. So, would you...
I'm just talking with our audience.
Okay, so I'll be doing the questions if we don't receive questions on any books that we have in our store. So first, of course, we'll be starting with Tumblr House books.
Oh, boy.
Because they should be given pride of place, as stated in Vatican II, of course.
As Vatican II implied, Tumblr House subsists in its books.
Yeah, exactly.
Or its books subsist in Tumblr House, one or the other.
Exactly. So a little before we I asked this last question, a little tidbit about our books. The copyright page. Someone recently asked me what the Latin saying meant under our logo. The Tumblr House slogan. We got the logo here, and it says "Bona, Tempora, Volvant."
No, I know what that means.
Yeah, what does that mean?
It's Latin.
Oh, well, okay. Well, what does that mean?
Well, what does what mean?
The Tumblr House slogan, Bona, Tempora, Volvant.
Oh, that. That means let the good times roll in Latin.
Did you come up with that, or Professor Biersack?
It was kind of a joint effort after a night of serious drinking. Anyway, it was a joint effort.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the Tumblr House slogan that I just thought I'd let people know. Let the good times roll. Okay, so the book we're going to be talking about today, Parson's Tale. Translated... taken from Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, translated by Mary Farrell Pomerleau. Yeah, and
she married a French Canadian, though you can tell she was Irish.
And forward by Charles Coulombe.
Oh boy, he's kind of an old crank.
But so I read this book about 10 years ago, and the thing the main takeaway I had from it was how strict the parson is, or the priest, his approach to Catholicism. It was so rigorous compared to our current approach. I remember specifically one of the things he said was he was talking about clothing and fashion, and he was saying that it was sinful if you wore clothing that was too fancy because there was too much vain labor, wasteful labor going on in making of your clothing, so that it was a sin to wear these types of clothes. So I guess I kind of have a multiple question. One, did medieval priests really behave? Did they talk like this?
Well, some of them did. One of the things you got to bear in mind, the reason why the Parson's Tale was published is because it is almost never translated into modern English.
Mm.
Well, usually when you pick up a modern English copy of the Canterbury Tales, it's given a summary, and the summary doesn't really say what it's about.
Right.
The truth is that the three classes, noblemen, clergy, and commoners of medieval society, are all skewered in the Canterbury Tales. And one of the ways that he skewers them is by having a virtuous representative of each. So, for the nobility, most of whom are represented are just, silly, but not the knight, who is the epitome of a very parfait gentleman.
Yeah.
The commoners, same. They're all out to lunch, except the Franklin, who is the brother of the one clergyman who's not out to lunch. It's the parson. Now, and this goes back once again to Mr. Dufault. Medieval society, made up of Catholics, nevertheless had its own share of horrors and sins. And Chaucer makes fun of them, which is a more effective way of condemning them, I think, than just saying they're bad.
Yeah.
But the parson, he brings it all to a point, and he makes sense out of it all. The fashions of that time, some of them were very strange. They liked, men's hose were very tight in the rear, and the rear was very often colored with garish colors.
Yeah, we were talking about this before. He talked like a baboon's.
Yeah, he says it makes it look like a baboon's rear.
Yeah.
And it says, why would you want to attract attention to that part of your body whence come foul smells and so forth? We don't dress that way, but we have our own fashions that are equivalently as strange. Why do we tattoo ourselves? Why do we run around with bare midriffs, especially if we're fat? I mean, it's one thing if you've got a taut stomach to be running around with a bare midriff. But if you've got a gut and that thing's hanging out, I speak from experience, don't do that to people. It's wrong. It's aesthetically displeasing. A lot of the specifics in the Parson's Tale are specific to medieval society, but the general principles carry on throughout. And of course, one of them is that you have to expect more from the clergy than from the laity. He summarizes this by saying, for if iron should rust, or if gold should rust, what can poor iron do?
Ah, yes.
That's referred to the clergy and the laity. And see, all of that stuff is timeless, it's perennial. Were they all as strict as he? No, they weren't. But he presents his parson as the ideal. It's just like today, if you were to do a similar story, like a pilgrimage to Lourdes or something, and you had a bunch of people from the Catholic world, it was the same thing. Some priests would have faith, some wouldn't. Some nuns would be pretty devout and sane. Others would be, sisters of creation.
Okay.
And that it's the same thing. If you ever go on an open retreat to a religious house, and not a very conservative religious house, but the kind where you'll have a real cross section of Catholics, you'd think you're in the middle of the Canterbury Tales again, because everyone's got their own story. And a few of them are quite together, and a lot of them sound a little bit crazy. But that's humanity. And Chaucer managed to do in the Canterbury Tales, in one book, what Shakespeare did in the whole of his work, which was to capture the many types of people in the time and place they lived in.
So, okay. So, what about his actual, what he preached on fashion? So, do you think there should be some mindfulness, like if you wear brand name clothing? I mean, is that a sin? Because it's
look, I don't know if it's a sin, but I think it's ridiculous for you to spend extra money on ripped designer jeans when you can get the same effect with a cheap pair at home. Just take a knife to them and see what happens. I think that some of us tend to put too much attention to fashion. If you're spending a lot of money that could go to something else, that's the equivalent of labor going into vain labor.
Oh, yeah, right.
The equivalent is wasting money.
Ah, that's true.
And you're wasting money on what? What price fashion? Well, it depends on what you're buying. The truth of the matter is that if you buy good, conservative clothing that'll last, you don't have to spend as much money as if you're trying to be on the latest magazine. It's like, the width of ties, all right? This tie is really not terribly thin the way they were when I was little, nor is it fat the way they were when I was a teenager. It's midway.
Uh-huh.
Every now and then, it is completely and totally in fashion. But it's never so far out of fashion that it looks weird.
Ah.
And that I think, it's... Now that's men's fashions, women's fashions. You think back to the 30s, or the 40s, or the 50s. Gosh, they know how to dress. And now they don't. Now it's these jeans and just horrible stuff.
Right.
Recently I put on my what do you call it? Oh, Zuckerberg's thing, Facebook. The picture of my mother and my Aunt Jenny walking down the street in New York in the 40s. My God.
It's classic.
Oh. But that was the way people dressed.
Yeah.
Well, it's not excessive, but man, does it look good.
Yeah.
And yet, you notice also that it was very modest.
Yes, that too.
It was alluring. It certainly showed them off to their best advantage, but it wasn't slutty by any means.
Right.
You could imagine if you tried to put the make on either one of them, you'd get a razor blade in your head. No, sorry, they weren't really like that.
Uh-huh.
Well, mother was. Anyway, the point is that, in matters of taste, there should be no dispute. But having said that, if you make out of fashion an idol, then you've sinned.
I see. Okay. Okay. Well, that's it. That's our show for today.
Well, golly, I've made an application to your brother for a similar fact-finding trip to start next week. Because, there's a similar set of classes being given on the French Riviera. And in my application, I explained that I felt that this was a very important follow-up to the training I'd received in the Bahamas. Now, the reason why I'm telling you about this is because I'm hoping that you'll co-sign it. Because he's likelier to act on it if you co-sign it.
Wow, I have to...
No, see, look. You want me to be as effective as I can in this organization, right? And that means being well-trained, right? Shouldn't I have the level of training equivalent to that of those other companies out there? Absolutely. So all you have to do is sign my application. You'll see the line where it says sign. That's all you have to do.
Well, okay, I'll sign it, but you know what? I'll remember that I did this for you.
I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, between now, the now being the Monday you're seeing this, and next Monday, let's have a vote. Should Charles be sent on a fact-finding mission to a corporate procedure seminar or conference in the Riviera?
Okay.
And if the majority vote in favor of it, you'll sign my application.
Okay, deal. The democratic spirit never goes wrong, as we've talked about.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, and I'm sensing a reluctance on your part to send me. I don't mean to be insulting, but I'm sensing you're not really with it. So, if they endorse it, you'll endorse it.
The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Yeah. That's how I felt when I got back from the Bahamas. Never mind. Anyway, the point is, no, so let's do that, ladies and gentlemen. You vote. Should Charles be sent to the Corporate Procedure Conference on the French Riviera?
Okay, there you go. Okay, and before we go, remember, this is Parson's Tale, 50% sale. It's normally $12. We're selling it for $6. Okay, so scoop it up. And if you have questions for Charles, you can contact us through the Tummer House website, the Contact Us page. And remember, if it's Monday, it's off the menu.
So long.